And we're live with Bala. Gonna try to pronounce that right. Kamallakharan.
You got it
Bala
right.
Kamallakharan. He's the founder at Startup Iceland, and the founder and managing director at Iceland Venture Studio. So Bala has a whole lot of experience here. If I check his LinkedIn, first started in the corporate world. So I guess that's quite classic. EY, Capgemini. Then went on to being an advisor and a consultant, board member for quite some time. Companies like GLO Biopharma, GIO Biopharma, Clara,
Yeah, yeah,
Green QI Cloud, Green Cloud, that is CEO at
yeah.
that. Found at Auro, but then became chairman at the Iceland Cricket Association in 2020. He's also been a managing partner and a founder at Myra Capital. So sort of a founder VC hybrid, I would say. And yeah, we're gonna talk about his interesting background so far, lessons in the founder world, his war stories, his VC stories as well, criteria for investments, and so forth. And this podcast presented to you by Bookwrite GPT. Bookwrite GPT will write a book for you from your LinkedIn post, feed it your LinkedIn post, and comes back with a nicely written book that you can publish on Kindle. So you can go to bookwritegpt.com. I have a free credit for you. Bala, welcome
Yeah.
to the pod. Tell me a bit more about yourself and what you're up to nowadays.
Yeah. Hey, Charles, thanks for reaching out. Happy to be here. Happy to talk to your audience. I mean, obviously, if you read the LinkedIn profile, it all feels like it was all planned. But I think up to maybe getting into Ernst and Young and Capgemini was probably part of the plan. But after that, nothing I did was ever planned. It was just me taking on a role with whatever life threw at me. My wife is Icelandic, so I live in Iceland. Uh, we met in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, while I was doing my PhD in economics, and she was doing her master's in marketing. And we lived in Houston, Texas. I was working on all kinds of Fortune 500 companies doing management consulting stuff, strategy, technology, project implementation, blah, blah, blah. And then once our daughter was born, my wife decided that she wanted to move to Iceland. And so I had to follow her to Iceland. And luckily, I got a chance to meet one of the Icelandic bank's CEOs. And as luck would have it, he was looking for somebody with my profile. And I joined the bank and I moved in 2006. And I was part of the Icelandic banking system for about 2 years. And I was appointed as the head of the bank for India. So I moved to Mumbai to start an Icelandic bank in India. And that's when the financial crisis hit. And then I think there are books written about what happened in Iceland. So I'm not going to go into that. The entire financial system collapsed. I moved back to Iceland and I looked around and I said, hey, what nobody else was doing. And that's what I wanted to do. I realized that nobody in Iceland were talking about startups or technology-based startups or building new companies. I said, hey, that's how the future is going to be. I should basically do that. So I didn't have any capital, so I actually went and begged my family to give me some money, and they did. I became an accidental investor in one startup. I took all that money and went all in. By the way, it was not a lot of money. It was about $300,000. And I sat with that team day in, day out, and I learned what it takes to do those things. And during that exercise, I realized that it's not enough to just invest in one company. You had to really build an ecosystem to support startups. So I founded Startup Iceland. I started running the Startup Iceland event and invited VCs like Bradfeld and others to come and, kind of share their wisdom and knowledge in this game of building companies and investing in the future and doing all those things. Yeah, I mean, that company that I invested in was acquired by a Nasdaq listed company in 3 years, and the second one was also acquired, and the third one was acquired. So suddenly I realized that maybe I was doing something that was creating incredible amount of wealth that I didn't realize was possible, because until then I was just working for somebody, and you know I really didn't understand how this wealth creation happened. And sure enough, when you build something the world wants, and you own equity in those businesses, that's how you create real wealth. And then I was just converted. I was hooked. I basically wanted to do more of that. I really enjoyed working with founders. I really liked the aspect of building the future that didn't exist. And my own story in Iceland is a future that didn't exist, and I built it really. This venture capital job didn't exist. I created one myself. The agency didn't exist. I created one. And we also live in a world that has a huge survivorship bias. So now that I'm alive, I can tell stories. If I died along the way, nobody would know. So that's also some form of humbling to know that you gotta be a good risk manager so you don't stick your neck out too big and get cut.
Right.
And that's kind of the crux of the story. I continue to do that. I run two venture funds now. Most of them are in the seed stage, and I'm now launching a third venture fund, an institutional fund that'll invest in seed to Series A or beyond, but in the cross section of technology and the blue ocean.
Right. First question, what prompted you to be crazy enough to beg your parents for money and then to invest? Like there must have been a book or a someone that influenced you to do that, because that must have been a pretty crazy big risk for you back then.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I didn't think it was crazy or big, but others thought it was crazy or big. That's how usually it is. Usually the ones who are building this, they don't think that it's that crazy. It's usually everybody else who thinks it's crazy. And I mean, at least in 2009, 2010, I was pretty convinced that the world will rely on technology for a lot of things. And I was surprised that nobody was building those things in Iceland. And then I looked around, actually, there were some people building it. And I really wanted to kind of, be part of that journey. I basically wanted to help them. And that's how I saw one team that I really liked. And this company was actually building the first large language model in Icelandic in 2009, 2010, like the precursor for all the AI stuff. And I thought it was pretty cool. And I said, hey, this is fantastic. I mean, how cool is it that we can actually teach machines to talk to us? And of course, given that that was something that I found interesting, and the team was very enterprising, inspiring, young founders, I really wanted to back them. I wanted to be with them. I really wanted to work for them. And only thing that they wanted to do was to raise money at that time, because they thought they were pretty resourceful. They actually had built a lot of things. I mean, this is before cloud computing became mainstream. So they actually had gone and hustled with some of the banks that had gone bankrupt and bought some of the old computers, and they hooked up their own servers. And they actually had built this just with commodity hardware using open source software, and they built pretty cool stuff. And I thought that they had a lot of chutzpah, and I was like, I want to back people like this. I know that's how you kind of create wealth. And obviously, I didn't have any money, so I had to go beg my family to do it, and they took pity on me and said, "Fine, go do this."
And
And
it
then,
was a pure passion play that fueled you, right? Because even after you've invested, you stayed there for like 2 to 3 years. So must have been torturous not to know like if this was gonna pan out or not, even if you were passionate. So the passion sort of fueled you. It was like so boring back then, the work you did with like big companies, and now that was the holy grail, working with
Mhm.
ingenious startups like that.
Right. I mean, passion would be one way to say it, but I don't think it was really passion in my mind. I mean, when I was a management consultant, I used to work with big companies, and the work was actually quite challenging and a lot of fun. I really enjoyed being a management consultant, because we would actually get parachuted into a big problem that, say, Hewlett Packard or Shell will be facing, and we had like this time boxed way to solve it, and I had to solve the problem, and I loved that problem solving thing. And then startups are nothing but problem solving. I mean, every day is problem solving. Every day there's a new problem. So I naturally gravitated towards doing that with founders, I mentally just changed my own model. And I looked at all founders like I was working with a Fortune 500 company. And I said, okay, this is a CEO of a Fortune 500 company. He has or she has this problem, and I'm there to help them solve it. And that's what kind of drove me. It was more about this curiosity to kind of fix things, curiosity to solve problems, which is a very founder trait, right? I mean, you see crack in the world and you want to fix it. And I kind of jumped into that. And so I wouldn't say it's passion. I just think it's kind of what you're built to do. I mean, kind of an engineering background, I kind of look at things in system way. And when systems are not working, I kind of start asking, why is it not working? Let's go find out why. And if we can fix it, let's fix it.
And you were boxed in Greenland. You had no way out of Greenland, and that these were the best companies in Greenland. That was the logic.
Well, it was Iceland, and I think Greenland is a lot smaller. I mean, in
Greenland,
Iceland,
yeah.
yeah, I mean, Iceland. I was very impressed with the teams that I met here, and that was also a big eye opener because when you think about it, a lot of people don't think that Iceland has tech and all that. But what was very surprising to me was the young people always grew up with computers here. Almost everybody grew up with computers. So some of the guys that I was meeting, they were like 21, 22 years old, and they'd been coding for like 10 years. And you gotta scratch your head and say, well, what? You're 21, you've been coding for 10? When did you start coding? He was like 11. Yeah, that was pretty amazing to me because I didn't even know what code was when I was 11. Right. So I thought that was also pretty unique. And I wanted to back that kind of future way. And I think the generation in Iceland was very future centric, and it was very easy to kind of help them and support them and back them.
And for the audience that doesn't know, I read the book about it and the books about it, but the financial crisis in Iceland, what happened? And do you feel that it affected yourself and the founders you backed?
Yeah. Sure. I mean, so in 2008, the financial crisis happened, and for those of you who don't know or haven't read through it, I think it's a good lesson in history. I think we all should read it. It was basically the subprime mortgage crisis that started in the U.S. Although the Icelandic banks did not have any exposure to any of those mortgage-backed securities, Iceland did have exposure to Lehman Brothers, which was my bank. We had a 3 billion euro line of credit from Lehman Brothers. And when the Federal Reserve let Lehman Brothers collapse, we suddenly had a 3 billion euro hole that we could not fill ourselves. And the Central Bank of Iceland just did not have enough money, foreign currency, to give us that money either. So we had to let the bank fail. And instead of failing the bank in Iceland, the Icelandic banking system was kind of bailed out. So it went into receivership. That means it goes into kind of bankruptcy protection. All the assets, I mean, banks don't go bankrupt, they become illiquid. Basically, they don't have money to run the bank. And that's what really happened in Iceland. And I was part of the bank that failed, and I was promptly fired. So one was kind of a big shock because all my life I've been kind of a type A personality. I've never been fired from any job. So it was very ego hurting. And it was also humiliating to look around and say, hey, I thought I was actually doing okay. I was, having lunch with finance ministers of India and Iceland and all that, and suddenly I'm unemployed. That was a pretty jarring, kind of like a Twilight Zone event. And then I looked around and I said, okay, maybe I should just get another job. I looked around, I couldn't find one. Nobody would hire me in Iceland. And then my wife, who was Icelandic, was suggesting maybe we should just go back to the US. And I don't know, maybe a part of me basically wanted to do that. And then there's another part of me which basically said, screw this, I'm not going to accept this. I'm going to go fix this, like the system thinking. And I said, and I told my wife, I'm going to fix this. And she said, what are you going to fix? What is it that you're really going to fix? And I said, I don't know, but I have this urge that I should do something about this, and that's how this whole notion of working with founders and helping build companies came about. And it obviously motivated me. It was, as they say, desperation is a great motivator. First you had to solve the agency problem. I somehow solved that, and then it took a while. But I mean, as they say, all good things take time. But if you if you're patient enough and work on yourself, I think you can figure it out.
And then you went back to India. Was that like revenge on your wife for bringing you to Iceland?
No, it wasn't much of a revenge. I think she enjoyed Mumbai more than I did. I know we were moved as a family. I was the head of the bank. It was a very different lifestyle, an expat lifestyle, and she had much full calendar schedule than I did, because expat wives had all kinds of schedules built up, and she really enjoyed being in Mumbai. Even today, we fondly talk about that 6 months we lived in Mumbai. It was fantastic.
Well, you
Um,
must have lived like a king there.
well, I wouldn't say king, but it was fun.
Because
We
you
we
can get
were
like a penthouse for like $500 a month there.
something like, I don't know about that, but as I said, no, we actually were staying in a pretty nice expat community, expat neighborhood, and my neighbors were like really who's who of the Mumbai community, and it was a lot of fun.
Right. Then what did you started? Oh, before I get to the next part of the story, the three on three exits, like that's very much uncommon, right? Like the strike
Mhm.
rate and in VC world is quite high. The home runs, it's 1 out of 10,
Yeah,
So
yeah,
what
yeah.
happened there? You did something quite unusual for sure.
Right. To be fair, I'm an accidental venture investor. I didn't, plan all this out. I did not run a venture firm or anything like that. I basically took money from my family and I went all in on this one team, and I literally had to burn the boats. So, if I didn't make good on that money, I probably would not have been able to go back to India. Or at least I told that to myself. And I said, I just need to make good on this investment. So I sat with the team every day. There's nothing like having skin in the game, right? If you're on the field and if you're playing the game and you have everything to fight for, then you really work hard and make it succeed. That's kind of what I thought I did, and I also thought that's what all VCs do. And then I learned that they do all this portfolio management mumbo jumbo bullshit. I didn't know what that was. I basically, every founder that I've invested, I've always been all in on them. And I usually don't invest if I don't want to work for them or help them build a great company. And I think if all VCs believe that model, like you gotta only invest in those companies that you believe will be massively successful. Why invest at all, right? I find that very interesting uh, way of investing. I don't understand that part, like this whole portfolio approach of investing. So to answer your question, so I did one team at a time. I basically went all in. I sat with the team. I did not have a formal role. I was not part of the management or anything of that sort. I actually looked at myself as just an outside counsel, kind of like a mentor slash a consultant. And I sat with the founders because I'd invested, they couldn't throw me out. So, and then usually, I didn't ask for a board seat, but because it was such early stage, they didn't have any board members, so they had to put me in the board. So I had excuse to sit there, and I would sit there and I would observe what they do. And by the way, being a fly in the wall, and then kind of jumping in and maybe making some suggestions. Obviously, you had to be good about it, otherwise they would kind of look at you like you gone stupid. So you had to do something useful. So I tried to make myself useful and try to help the founders. I thought I did, and sure enough, the team succeeded and they got acquired. I did the same for the second team that was acquired by Priceline, and then Green Cloud. I was the CEO. I invested, but I also became the CEO of the company because some of the investors thought I would be a better CEO. I fixed the business model and brought some new team members, changed the board structures. And then once they started really scaling, I exited from that. And the fourth one was Guide to Iceland, which became one of the most successful startup marketplaces in Iceland for travel industry. And Guide to Iceland is still operational and they're doing really well. So that company got major investment from the GE's pension fund in 2018. So once that exit happened, I took some money off the table and I turned around and said, I like doing this. I think I've kind of learned my stripes. Maybe I can do this at scale. So I launched Iceland Venture Studio as a venture studio. That's why I call it a venture studio, because I actually work with the founders every day. I mean, that's what I do. The only criteria that we set when we invest with founders is that they need to commit 1 hour a week with me. So I talk to them every week. I get a pretty good download about all the challenges that they're facing, and I try to be helpful and try to encourage them in areas where they could focus and prioritize. And if I can be helpful in doing something for them, I'm happy to do that. And I've seen that this is kind of like the secret sauce in my success story. I basically commit and I'm all in. I don't see myself as some external actor. I look at it as I'm all in on this team and we want to see it win.
Right. The Bala recipe, if I can summarize it, like obviously you're very smart, you're a great problem solver. And when you invest into business, you're hands on, right? So you're also like sort of an operator, if one could say. And the
Mhm.
third ingredient, I think, is the Icelandic ecosystem, right? Which you have like exclusivity on, because no one will step foot in Iceland, and even like trying to close transactions from a distance might feel odd. It's such an interesting culture, Iceland, an interesting country,
Mhm.
interesting experiment, sort of. I really need to learn more about this. My next question for you is, I tend to view, and let me just mute you for a second because I'm hearing myself. Consultants, right? Like highly paid consultants. I think most are not like you, like obsessed with problem solving. I think a lot are just like a trust fund baby out of the university, and they just have this job for a couple of years and it's well paid and so forth. Am I wrong in thinking that, like Deloitte consulting, BCG consultants, KPMG consultants? And do you think that AI is replacing these type of consultants, or are they really like problem solvers like you?
Well, I mean, I I can't comment for all consultants, but I can
But you've worked
say,
with them, so you know like how they are, most of
yeah,
them.
I mean, I used to work with them, and the teams that I worked with, I think all of them actually had very similar mindset like I did.
Okay.
While I was doing management consulting, I can only talk about the time that I was a practitioner of management consulting. But today, you're probably right? Because AI actually solves a lot of the problems for you. So what used to be the consultant domain is now partly AI domain. But consultants, I mean, the good ones, I'm not talking about all the ones, I'm thinking the good ones actually um, are good problem solvers, right? I mean, that's what you want. That's why you hire them. You hire them because they're problem solvers. It's not that you can't solve the problem, it's just that you can't solve the problem and run a company. I mean, that's why you kind of bring somebody from the outside so they might have a fresh perspective, but also can do some of the heavy lifting within a timed zone, right? I mean, the whole idea of consulting is that it is boxed, it's time boxed. It's not like an unbounded thing. It's not like a job. It's not like you're going to work there for the next 10 years. You got to do it in the next 3 to 5 to 10 to 16 weeks. So you better run and actually figure the problem out, figure out a solution, and actually implement it and do it, right? And I think what has happened is that the world has changed a lot, right? I mean, the time that I was a consultant, the internet was just starting, social media was not even there, right? It's from the year 1999 to the year 2006. So this was like the time when internet became mainstream, like the web 2.0, I would say, the Yahoo, the Amazon of the world were becoming mainstream. And at that time, a lot of the businesses were struggling on how to get on the web and use internet as a technology. And a lot of the strategy was about implementing internet related technologies into companies. So it was a lot more tangible projects. But once that phase was done, Web 3.0, the commerce phase came in, and then companies wanted to build things that lived on the internet. And at that time, I kind of switched over to being a banker. I wasn't part of that game. And when you really kind of solve these two problems using systems and computers, you realize that the management consultant role kind of becomes a lot narrower, right? I mean, what else are you going to do, right? There's only one thing that you could do. It could do labor arbitrage. That is, you can do something faster, cheaper. And the companies now with AI can do that themselves, right? So it is a pretty tough challenge for a management consultant in the next 3 to 5 years. But I think, if they hire smart people, they will figure out how to work with AI and possibly deliver more value to companies than they can do it themselves. And it's not like these technologies are not accessible to everybody. It's accessible to everybody. But if you're a smart person, then you can probably use it better, right? And if you can use it better, you can probably create more value faster. And at least I would presume that it would basically be normalizing management consulting, where you will only hire the top 1% of the talent pool into doing these things, not everybody. So it won't be a game of hiring all these people who just want to have management consulting on their resumes. Because if you're that kind of a person, then you will fail very quickly, right? Because you got to really be a hard problem solver to be useful. And I hope it gets to that, right? Because that's what clients pay you money for. You have to solve the hard problem.
Right. Last but not least, tell me about the day in your life nowadays. What time you wake up? What do you do during the day? And also, what
Mm.
kind of companies do you invest in? Which one are the most impressive?
Yeah. I mean, I don't compromise on sleep. I usually get to bed usually around 10:30 ish, and I sleep till like maybe 6:37. So that's a good 7.5, 8 hours of sleep. Um, Mornings I usually drink coffee and do some yoga and meditate if I can. But most of the time, just sitting still with myself, my own thoughts, and you know, doing things. I usually get to work around 8ish. I have two daughters. One daughter is 9, so I usually get her up and get her to school, do all those things, and then usually breakfast, 7:30 ish, and then I get to work. I have my office in the Iceland Ocean Cluster House. It is by the harbor. It's a very scenic place. It's beautiful. Iceland is beautiful. It doesn't matter where you go, it's beautiful. So I'm really privileged to be here to do that. So I get in. Usually I have days planned in terms of meetings with founders, because I spend a day, an hour with every founder, and we have almost 24 companies that we have invested in. So my days are spread around talking to founders. And in addition to that, I play many other roles, which is, I'm also the chair of the Indo Icelandic Trade Council. So I interface with the government on a number of things around trade, immigration, all kinds of things. And then I'm also the chair of the Iceland. I used to be the chair of the Iceland cricket. So at that time, that used to take a lot of my time trying to kind of organize things and get the tournaments going. But nowadays, there's another board that is taking care of that. So I'm not spending a lot of time doing that. Um, and then, usually I'm done by like 3, 4ish with the teams, and I'm usually exhausted by then, because, you know, you kind of compress 10 startup problems into one day. You do get exhausted, and I usually get home, and then I usually work out, eat dinner with family, and that's pretty much it. And so the next question was, what are the startups that I
Yes,
invest
the
in?
startups, the niches are
Yeah, yeah,
impressive
yeah.
ones, and also like what criteria is in founders, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, um, my thesis is quite simple, because we invest in pre-seed, seed. We invest in mission-driven founders working on hard problems. And again, it's a pretty broad spectrum. We don't pick any specific domain or technology. Obviously, technology is just a tool. If you can use the tool to solve a hard problem, then we want to hear about it. And some of the impressive companies that we have invested in now, one is actually a breakout. It's called Indo, which is a bank. Ironically, I was one of the early investors in a brand new bank that we launched in 2022, 23. And within 18 months, that company has acquired over 80,000 customers. And it is now the most recommended brand in Iceland. And it's been a runaway success. It is a digital wallet, really. It's, although it has a banking license, but what it is but a digital wallet. It allows people to have a fantastic current account. It's very intuitive. Anybody can use it very quickly. You can download it and have a bank account ready. Most of the KYC is done through the KYC is for know your customer is done through the banking app, and you don't have to walk into a headquarters or do any of those things. You less than 5 minutes, you have a bank account up and running. And as I said, this company is doing exceptionally well in Iceland, and we're very happy with the team. And what is the clincher is that the company employs only 25 people, and they serve 80,000 customers. So, no other bank can really compete with that, because they'll have to fire all their employees to actually get to that point, and they're never going to do that. So that is also an important thing. I mean, from an advice and maybe what we look for in founders, what we really look for are founders who are, kind of all in on a problem. They're really committed to the problem. They really want to go and solve some hard things. And last but not least, I also think that you can't win these games by playing by the same rules. You need to have some X factor in you that allows you to kind of change the rules of the game. The simple example is with this bank. If you went and played the banking game with the existing bank players and we didn't have the same rules, if we played by the same rules, we'll always lose, right? Because they obviously have more money, more people, more resources. So we leveraged technology and we said, okay, if we built a bank that did not require any person to run it, how would it look? And we thought, can we do it? And we thought, we should try it. And we tried it and we could do it. And it actually worked. And sure enough, it changed the rules of the game. We showed that you could actually build a bank without having a headquarters, without having, hundreds of people working for it, and so on and so forth. So that's kind of rules that I would suggest to founders. If you're going into a market that is well established, always change the rules of the game by doing something very different and unique to win customers. But I mean, there are two ways to build startups. Build something that nobody else is doing. Then you don't have to really struggle so hard to come up with new rules. You can actually just focus on your customer and build that product for them because nobody else is doing it. That's one way to do it. The other one is, going into established markets and changing the rules of the game. I think both require a lot of grit, both requires a lot of commitment, both require a lot of luck, and of course you need capital. And my view is that money doesn't solve all problems. Money solves money problems. So there are lots of other problems that money does not solve. So you got to put on this problem solving hat and go after that and solve that before you go raise money. Smart ones know how to do it. I think that's the key. The key is that you need to be resourceful, you need to be smart. I think it was Paul Graham who kind of said that you got to be like James Bond. I mean, I'm not so sure about blowing up things, but I like the idea of James Bond. I think you got to be like James Bond with limited resources, with unsurmountable odds. You should be able to jump in and win. And that's what the founders that I have backed usually do. They jump in with all the odds against them, but they find a way to win.
Fascinating. I'll pay a visit for sure in Iceland and meet a bunch of founders in the next 2 years. Can coin me
Yeah.
on that. Bala, where can we find out more about you?
I mean, I'm very easily findable nowadays, primarily because on January 1st, 2025, I was bestowed with the Order of the Falcon Award by the President of Iceland for my work in promoting entrepreneurship and building technology-based companies in Iceland. This is the highest honor bestowed on a civilian in Iceland, I'm told. So, I'm pretty easily findable. I'm usually quite responsive to founders when they reach out to me through any channel. I'm on all the social media channels, and my email is bala@startupiceland.com, so anybody can write to me. And as I always tell people when I meet them, they usually give me a card, and I say, just Google me, you'll find everything about me, and I'm sure you'll find a way to contact with me.
There you go. So that was Balan Charles for another CEO Wisdom